we'll get started, everyone. So, good evening. Welcome, members of the public who are joining us here in the gallery and those who are joining us online. I will begin by calling to order the Committee of the Whole meeting for the Summerside City Council of September 3rd, 2024, here being 5 o'clock p.m. I begin with a call for a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Councillor Adams, second. Councillor Snow.
Can we amend something in Committee of the Whole to include Chestnut? So it just says Poplar Street, but there's a couple properties.
Plus Chestnut.
Yep.
Any issues with council on that? Just a second. So we will now again call for a motion moved by Councillor Adams to approve the agenda as amended to include the Chestnut on item 6G. Seconded by Councillor Doiron. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, we'll keep moving forward. We begin by acknowledging that the land upon which we gather is the unceded Mi'kmaq territory. Abogway is covered by the historic treaties of peace and friendship. We pay our respects to the indigenous Mi'kmaq people who have occupied this island for over 12,000 years, past, present, and future. At this point, I'll ask any member of council to declare a conflict of interest with respect to any item on the agenda before you this evening. Hearing none, we'll keep ticking right along. Move into item 5, committee reports and recommendations. I'd ask Director Gunn, Director of HR and Legal Services, to come present a report, recommendations from the, what do we call your committee there, Carrie? Bylaw, Governance and Communications. So at this point, I'll hand it over to Director and to Chair Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't really need to say too much. Kendra's just going to go over some of the changes and some of the reasoning behind some of the changes we were looking at. Nick, did you want to? There was really nothing too much.
No, I think it's pretty self-explanatory.
Sure. Hi, everybody. In the package materials that Brian sent out last week, I included a summary for discussion as well. I think you were provided a copy of our taxi bylaw. I'm just going to run through those discussion points. First of all, the whole reason the whole taxi bylaw came up was late last fall, early winter, a rideshare company started doing business in the town, and we were approached by the business, and then we were subsequently approached by local taxi drivers about the issue. So we had discussion at the committee level on a number of occasions, and these are some of the discussion points that came up, and we put forward for your information today. Summerside's taxi bylaw regulates the annual licensing of taxi stands, taxi drivers, and taxi cabs. It also sets the minimum insurance, $2 million, licensing fees, various offenses and penalties, and maximum fares that can be charged. The most notable of the offenses is delivering/consuming alcohol. The Chief of Police receives all applications and can grant or deny for any reason in the public interest, or forward to council for its decision. The chief can also suspend a license for good reason. On the rideshare business side, they operate through applications or apps. There is considerable amount of data gathered and retained through the apps, and this information can be subpoenaed if necessary. I raise that in terms of information gathered for any allegations of criminal activity. Carrie has been operating, this is the business name, Carrie, has been operating in Summerside since last December. We have no knowledge of any complaints being filed with the police pertaining to safety/security issues. Rideshares are most often used by individuals who are comfortable using apps on their smartphones to book services. A jurisdictional scan of other similar sized municipalities across the country identified that several communities do not attempt to regulate either taxis or rideshare businesses. So some of the stats were, for example, Mayor Kutcher provided me a lengthy list of similar-sized municipalities, 64 in number, and I went through all 64 websites and determined that 10 had taxi bylaws and 2 had rideshare bylaws. The remainder had neither. Those municipalities that do regulate one or both are often larger communities, and the bylaws have larger and more complex licensing arrangements. These bylaws would require dedicated resources to ensure compliance. Larger regional municipalities such as Charlottetown and St. John's have traditional taxi bylaws and do not currently regulate ride-share companies. I would note that Kerry does operate in Charlottetown. Halifax and Moncton have combination vehicle for hire taxi bylaws. St. John and Fredericton have separate vehicle for hire and taxi bylaws. And it's apparent that licensing fees are revenue generators in the larger city centers. Local taxi stand operators from United, Old Town, and Lucky's were contacted and invited to present any views or concerns about the new rideshare company operating in the city to the Bylaw Governance and Communications Committee. 2 persons attended from United, and neither identified any concerns about the rideshare company. They did not see their clientele switching to rideshare. They were concerned about the potential for larger taxi companies coming to work in the city, so a competition argument. They advised that there are 42 cabs in the city, between 60 and 70 drivers. Taxis in the city primarily transport individuals who do not have access to their own transportation, often those from vulnerable sectors, for example, the elderly, low income, or disabled. One may ask the question as to whether regulatory powers in the city's taxi bylaw offer any tangible additional protection that is not already provided through provincial legislation. So licensing laws in the province, so all persons transporting others for monetary gain must have a Class 4 driver's license. Everyone who operates a vehicle must have annual inspections. There is a minimum $2 million insurance required by all registered vehicle owners. And so market factors, rate, fares, so supply and demand and how that would impact rate fares. It's my understanding through discussions with both the chief and the deputy, and they've both read this summary and confirmed this, that policing of the taxi bylaws is low priority issue for the simple reason that they do not receive many related complaints. Other than physically receiving and issuing annual licenses, there is not much police involvement in the operation of the service. They did not raise any specific concerns pertaining to potentially repealing the bylaw. So based upon the information garnered during the review process and consideration of the parameters of the city's current bylaw, the committee recommends that council consider repealing the taxi bylaw. This belief is based on the understanding that there would be little or no impact on either the businesses or the clientele they serve. I would note that in the document, the committee of the whole document, I gave kind of 4 considerations. So you could maintain the status quo, repeal the bylaw, create a new rideshare bylaw, or create a new combined taxi rideshare bylaw.
Is Thank you, Director. Chair, do you have anything to add further to the discussions and recommendations from the committee? And then we'll go to council with comments and questions, and we'll start with
No.
Councillor Snow.
I don't have anything unless, Nick's on the committee as well, so I just wanted to make sure that.
Corey, we'll go to you next.
I just wanted to add, when discussing about the company coming in and having issues with potentially bigger taxi stands coming in, there's nothing currently stopping from them to do that right now.
Correct.
Yeah, I
Correct.
just wanted to make sure that everyone is aware of that. With the current bylaw,
Yeah.
a bigger taxi company could come in. They really had no issue with carry or rideshare itself. It was concerns around whether or not someone bigger would come in and take their clientele, not necessarily rideshare.
Okay, we'll go with council for comments or questions. We'll go Councillor Snow first, then Councillor Doiron, and then Councillor McDougall to begin.
So I had a few questions based on this, but if the ultimate decision is to repeal it, then those questions are sort of mute. But the one question that does matter if we do repeal it would be the fares. So currently there is a fare structure that they can only charge a maximum of.
Yep. Do you want me to state what those are out loud so you can hear them?
You can, yeah, I have them in front of me, but you can,
Okay.
for everybody to see, I guess,
Okay, hold on.
or hear.
So it's based on the number of persons. So one person, maximum fare $11, and then there's a senior's discount for each one of these of 50 cents less.
Yep.
Two persons, $12, three persons, 13, four persons, 14, five persons, 15.
And so that's within city limits. I guess my concern is, and maybe it takes care of itself, and maybe that's, the competition thing that's not an argument that new businesses open every day that creates competition, so. But if we repeal this, and then is it just Wild West for taxi fares where you jump in? So I think if I go to a bigger city, you jump in, you usually see they have a taximeter, so you know what they're charging you. Or if you do a ride share, usually before you get picked up, they know what they're charging you.
Yep.
If this was to be repealed, and then you just jump in the cab the way it currently is set up in Summerside, when you reach a destination, they tell you, hey, it's $10. So now would it be, hey, it's $20? I'm just worried of how that would be policed and what that might mean for seniors, or we were saying low-income families are the ones that mainly use this service, or seniors, and then not having that financial restriction. That sort of concerns me a little bit, so I'm just curious if there was any thought put into that, or what.
I believe the discussion around the committee table, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, was that market factors would determine the rates. If they've been operating within certain parameters for a period of time, and they have so much ridership, whether they're going to be able to maintain that ridership if they increase their fares too much, or any, or...
Because right now, there's no minimum, right? Anybody, they can charge
Correct.
whatever they want,
Correct.
but there's a max. So I'm just concerned what that could possibly mean if all of a sudden you're driving from Notre Dame Street to the Holland College and it's $20. Because there's no set, and maybe it's not a concern.
When we talked to the drivers, they didn't really seem to think it was an issue because people would be pricing themselves out of business, was sort
Yes.
of how they felt.
Yep.
Especially with the considerable amount of taxis we have in the city, already. And then with the ride share, in addition to that, they didn't seem to think that somebody or they would see significant price increases that would, they just didn't think it would make sense. It was just like, not
It would
much.
be a market factor determination. Nobody has a crystal ball to predict exactly what will happen, but I would predict that if one company raised their fares too much, people would go to the other. Now, if there was a bit of collusion and people all raised their fares, then you're going to lose business altogether because people won't be able to afford the cabs.
Councillor Doiron?
Yeah, thank you. So I guess, based on your summary, I mean, I'm certainly supportive of possibly repealing, just it'll be one less thing that we need to, regulate, police, and I think that's a good thing. Just one question, and I think that I know the answer, it's just the follow-up to that question. If we repeal, obviously, we would be doing away with the licensing fees.
Correct.
So I guess my question is, and I don't imagine that it would be, would that make much of an impact on our yearly? No, so, okay.
No.
That's very minimal. Yeah, okay. No, that's everything. Thanks.
Kristen's not here to answer that, but I'm,
Councillor McDougall?
Thank you, Your Worship. My issue was around rates, as Deputy Mayor was. I know the last time that we had the taxi drivers and taxi owners in the room, there was a big discussion around lowballing of pricing and people operating the business from outside the city, not operating in the city. I don't have a big, strong will either way to do away with it, or I can be convinced of that. It's just, I know there should be something there, whether it's registering for a taxi license. I think we should have a taxi license, just so we know how many taxis are operating. If we just let it go willy-nilly, then we don't have much control on it, or any control. I'd have no problem with the licensing fee. There's lots of this that probably doesn't really matter, because, as you say, it's legislated by provincial rules anyway. But and the other thing was, if somebody reports that a taxi's not clean, who do they report that to? Because I've heard of that before. No, I'm not sure.
Well, I don't think they currently report it to the police anyways. It goes back to the company. So it's for that company to
Right.
deal with for their
Yeah.
rider.
But who would the people report to? If somebody had a complaint about a taxi,
So you
In the
call
city.
the dispatch or whoever, like if I went to,
yeah, but if you call the
Taxi.
dispatcher,
yeah, and they could make a complaint, a formal complaint
yeah, and
that
if they
way
don't get any satisfaction there, where do they go?
to another taxi company.
Well, yeah, but then again, we still have that cab that's
Yeah.
have an issue.
Yeah.
Anyway,
But I guess it's the company the companies don't want a bad name, so it would be like any company and their
Right.
staff member that's representing the company. It
Yeah,
would be
like-
up to them to,
those are the
Deal
only
with that.
questions that
Yep.
sort of raised. But thanks.
Councillor McColman?
Thank you, Your Worship. And it may very well be in here, but just one question that comes to mind for me is with the licensing, is there anything, like is there identification in the taxi? I know that anybody, taking a taxi would have a name of what taxi stand that they're coming to or going to with. But I'm thinking of vulnerable people that have come through abuse, people who are in the system somehow and just gets into a taxi and runs into a bad experience, or somebody that knows a situation they're going through or whatever. Like how do we, if the police are not involved in anything like that and we're not going to have the licensing, how is there some kind of a mechanism that would be that would take the city out of that fray of being in a situation?
I think it would still be policed by the police in the sense that if somebody had an experience that was, criminal in nature, it would be brought to the police for an investigation.
So there would be identification, there would be a name, there would be a number that somebody would be able to have that.
And the only thing I can say on that, Norma, would be that anybody who operates a vehicle for hire in the
Right.
province has to have a Class 4 driver's license. And I looked up the process for what it involves. Driver cannot be in the graduated driver license program. There's a fee, current medical certificate, vision check, vehicle pre-check, road test. Vehicle must be in good mechanical condition, all seat belts in working order.
Well, I mean, I'm not trying to cast any sort of doubts or whatever, but I'm just thinking with some certain aspects of situations, people could be very vulnerable and in a situation where they might not want to speak up or they might not want to say something, but if there was a number or a license or whatever that they could verify, I think that would give them a bit of security. That's why I'm asking.
Councillor Cameron, and then back to Councillor Snow.
Just to touch on Councillor McColman, during our meeting, was it United? Is that who?
United.
Okay. So they stated that they are moving a little bit more towards how a rideshare works, in the sense if I called and I booked, they take your number and they will send you a text with what car is coming and who could be in it. They're moving towards that, so maybe not necessarily that you need a display of who is picking you up, but you will potentially have that information. Now, that is only United. The other two companies weren't there, and we don't know what they potentially could do, but they did say that they are moving closer towards what rideshare does. We already, you know, the make and model of the car, you know, the license plate number, you know who's driving the car. Not saying necessarily that they are doing all of that, but they have said that that's where they see themselves going down the road, if that puts any ease in your mind.
It's not even a case of ease in my mind, because as I say, I don't want to cast anything on drivers or whatnot. There's excellent drivers, but I know sometimes those kinds of questions would come up, and I wouldn't want it to be incumbent on the city to have to be caught in the middle of a situation.
So, yeah, I am sort of on the fence with this. Not that, I think probably in our bylaws probably a little extensive, but there are some really good points to our bylaw that I do like. I do like the fact that the rates are somewhat controlled at a maximum. I do like the fact that, you know, they have to keep records of where they're going, what's going on. That could be very helpful in a lot of situations. I just would hate to lose maybe some of those aspects of the bylaw that might, as we're just, I don't know if I like the aspect that the chief of police has to be overseeing it. I think we waste our police resources. We have a bylaw officer now that I think there's lots of things that we could take off plates and shift around if we were to readjust this, but still have some structure in place for both rideshare and I'd be concerned where it might end up. Might not end up there. It might continue the way it is, but there are some pieces of the current bylaw that I do like and think we should consider maybe keeping some form of a bylaw.
Does the city of Summerside regulate any other businesses? No. And, well, I'm trying to think of any, and I don't know of any that we do. And there could be 100, but I can't think of any. And I'm just wondering why we do this.
Well, that was a question that was discussed at the committee level. Why are we regulating this?
Right.
And
Free
not-
market's a wonderful thing. I mean, if anybody's doing anything wrong, the market will correct most issues. You know, and I shouldn't use the word or term wrong, but, you know, as far as pricing, too high, too low, you know, the market has a wonderful way of figuring stuff out for you. I just can't imagine why we would be involved in such a thing when we're not involved in anybody else's business. And I just can't imagine why we are in this one.
I can imagine it's the potential vulnerable clients that historically municipalities wanted to try and protect or look after. I don't know if our bylaw does that or does not do that. I don't know.
Is food trucks the only other one that we sort of keep track of?
Sorry,
Is
Karen.
food trucks the only other one that we sort of keep track of?
Yeah.
With food trucks, we regulate like the land use aspect of it, right? But we don't regulate any of the,
Yeah, there'd be health and safety would be provincial around
Right.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's the provincial part on the taxi part as well.
Yeah, they regulate the minimum
Yeah.
insurances and the inspection of the vehicles and the licensing. Which, you know, if there were any issues, would be followed up through the police under, say, Highway Traffic Act infractions or criminal, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. All good points, and I just seen in here where we contacted all the taxi companies and only 2 from one company showed up. The question to them I read, it was, were contacted and invited to present any views or concerns about the new rideshare company operating in the city.
We asked that, but we did ask questions around the business operating model.
Did we ask them whether did we say whether we were considering appealing the bylaw?
Repealing?
Yeah, repealing, yeah, whatever,
I don't remember, Nick?
yeah.
Yeah, I think that was sort of why we told them we were there. It was to review
Around the necessity.
the necessity of
What-
the bylaw,
The-
in
there wa-
addition to the rideshare.
That was why they raised the concern around the competition from larger taxi companies.
That's the 2 that showed up. Is that
Yes.
who you're talking about?
Yeah.
No, I guess what I'm saying is the people that were contacted were just contacted because we were, wanted comments about the new rideshare. They weren't questioned what their thoughts were on repealing the bylaw. I'm just
I can
wondering-
check my email,
Yeah.
Bruce, because
Yeah.
we did
Yeah.
initially
just-
send emails out.
I would
I think
just-
it was any concerns related to the taxi
Okay,
bylaw.
and that would be fair. I just wouldn't want to repeal it and then have somebody come back and say, well, we weren't asked that. So just a red flag for me. Thanks.
Okay, any other further comments, questions from council? Couple options on how we proceed. One, go back to committee for further discussion. Second would be, it goes no further. And the third, then it would be moved towards council for a vote. What the committee has made a recommendation to repeal the taxi bylaw. What do members of the council want to do next?
I don't think we're under the gun to do anything one way or the other. To Bruce's point, if we could just get clarity if the current taxi operators have any concerns with repealing the taxi bylaw. So back to your
We
point,
can do
checking,
that.
and then just bring it back from there, and I think that would, yeah.
Members of the committee okay with reaching back out to taxi operators? Perhaps we could also publicize that council is reviewing and considering the repeal of the bylaw. We could share that on our social channels if there are any further comments or questions from members of the public, and we could move forward at that point.
Or groups, could we ask for groups?
Yeah, any member of the
Like
public would
helping-
be,
People helping groups that maybe,
yeah, that would certainly, yeah, be open to anyone to submit comments or provide feedback. Great, so we can send that back to committee and then it can come back to council. Director Gunn? Is it okay with you?
Nothing further, yeah?
Okay, great, thanks everyone. Next, we move into item 6. We'll start with 6A. As you see, council have reorganized how the agenda is structured here. Continue to tweak to try and make things as effective as possible. Each one of the committee of the whole discussion items does have an associated committee of the whole submission from the member of council that put it on, so I appreciate you all doing that and giving everyone the opportunity to read about the issues in advance. So we begin with item 6A, which is Eco Park tenant. Councillor Adams. Councillor?
Thank you, Your Worship. So the document, the submission is attached for everybody to review. But just, I guess, I mean, I don't know what everybody else is, but I'm questioning on it at least once a week where we are with this. I think people look at this as this is a city project, so it's their project, so they want to know the status of it. They want to know who we have moving into it. And so on. You know, it's in a very visible area, so I think that the public deserves an update on where we are with it.
Sure, I can help with that. So we're in the final stages of finalizing a lease with an island company. Just finalizing a few of the fit-up details, and then we're pretty confident that that lease will be signed in the very near future. The building is should be done end of September or 1st of October. Economic Development Office is working with a real estate company on a campaign to sell the lots. They're also attending a trade mission in the very near future with the sole goal of attracting tenants to the park. And also working with the province innovation, with Department of Innovation, or Innovation PEI, I guess, on some other tenant leads that have come through their office.
I guess we just always hear, just like sort of trigger was the trip to try and find more people to fill the space, but we're constantly hearing that we don't have business space here for people. So I'd really like the push to be put on providing space for the people we have here and that are needing the space and reaching out to them. I mean, we see it weekly, people looking for space and so on. And I just want to make sure that we're reaching out to those people to see what the need is before we create a new avenue of needs that we can't fill by going and reaching out for more people to fill them from out of province, out of countries. I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but it's just, there's always such concern that we don't have the office space, et cetera, here, so.
Great, thank you, Council. Maybe we can get an update then at the next meeting as well as to further progress from.
Dan, just.
Yeah, Councillor Snow.
You mentioned in the final stages of the lease agreement, I know when we talked about moving ahead with this, there were financial implications for the city in regards to lease rates and so on. I assume those are all continued to be pushed or looked at to make sure that we are covering our costs. I'm trying to say stuff without saying stuff, I guess.
I mean,
The idea, the goalposts haven't changed in regards to leasing. Okay.
So you're asking, are we wearing any of this because we're not getting anybody in it?
No, what I'm asking is the future tenant or tenants, when we talked about this originally and moving forward with it, there were lease payments that we needed to
Yep.
get in order to cover the costs for the city, and we move forward on
Yep.
those guidelines. That, like,
Right.
council, at that time, council's understanding were that the lease payments would cover the costs of operating the building moving forward. So I just want to make sure that we're still on that path as
Yeah, of
opposed
everything
to
getting
just
covered.
finding somebody to fill.
Yeah.
Oh, Councillor Morrison.
Just a question. The lease deal that's being worked on, is that for 100% of the square footage, or 50%, or?
No, it's not 100, it's, I was gonna say it's over 50, I'm not exact,
You're not sure,
I'm not sure off the top of my head, but it's not 100, it's over 50.
Okay, and I don't know if anybody else is interested. I'm just thinking right around the time construction maybe finishes up out there, would there be any chance that some of us could have a tour
Yeah.
or have a look and just see what's there? And
Actually, we're,
you're probably working on it.
actually, well, Economic Development Office requested that, wants to give
Yeah.
council a tour, and Sanders just in the process of trying to find dates that work.
Yeah, it's just easier for me to speak to it
Yeah.
sometimes when I see things, so, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Adams. With that, we'll follow with an update next month and a tour. And by note, Councillor McDougall and I did go on a tour. We toured as part of the Atlantic Mayors Congress that was held here in Summerside. That was on the agenda. I think I mentioned that here with you before, and it's a very impressive facility and maybe a little specific in terms of the tenants, but something hopefully we can be really proud of going forward. Item 6B, Regent property. Councillor Adams.
Thank you again, Your Worship. So my submission is there for everybody to read. Just in short, again, and maybe it's because I work downtown, I get asked about it a lot, but just people are very curious about the timeline for construction to commence on the Regent property. In addition to that, construction date, there's a lot of question out there, chatter about who owns the property, and if the developer is to walk away, does it revert back to the city?
Answer the second question first. Yeah, the development agreement that, I guess council would have had a line of sight on and approved originally. Absolutely, if the developer doesn't do what they said they were gonna do, or walks away from the project for whatever reason, yeah, the ownership would, be maintained with the city. On the construction timeline, I can, and we don't usually comment on permit applications, but the developer does have their permit application in. Staff reviewed all last week, or early last week. There were a few, I'll say, minor type changes that either needed a little bit more information or needed to be amended. Those went back to the developers team kind of mid last week, and we are hopeful that we'll get the answers to those questions early this week, and permits should be issued in the very near future, maybe this week, maybe the first of next week.
So if all that works out, like, has the developer mentioned a time, like, when they
Yeah,
are
yes,
sort of,
sorry.
what's like the? what's-
Construction would start
Yeah, what are they aiming
almost
for?
immediately after the permits are issued. It is, I think it's valuable to note that the developer has multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars invested into the project already. So they're invested, they are working towards obviously starting and finishing the project, but
So when a developer has money invested into something, but there's nothing there, that's in terms of people that they're hiring for plans and so on? Is that what you
yeah,
mean?
architectural, engineering, designs, site plans, all those sorts
Yeah.
of things, yeah.
Yeah.
And there
Stuff.
has been,
The stuff that people don't see, the
yeah,
preliminary.
there's a lot, there's obviously a lot of work
Yeah.
that goes into
Yeah.
a project like that, and I think this developer and other developers would say that there's been a backlog of that
Yep.
engineering, architecture, site plan work. The professionals who provide that in PEI have been very busy over the last 18 months, and they continue to be, so the turnaround time on that type of work is not necessarily as quick as it would have been 3 or 4 years ago, but as of right now, application permits are in, permits haven't been granted, but they're hopefully days away, not weeks or months, but days.
Thank you, Councillor. Just a quick note on that as well, just generally across the region, there are a number of projects, when I speak to my counterparts in other provinces and then across here in PEI, that are delayed to a certain extent arising from the issues with engineering services provided in New Brunswick. So there were some qualification issues with respect to engineering services provided in New Brunswick. Not the buildings had to go. I know certain mayors have buildings that are constructed and in their downtowns and about to open, that there are now issues with the qualifications of the people who designed those buildings. So a lot of those are back having to be re-reviewed. So across the region, there are a series of delays that, again, reminds us that something happens across can impact us as well here. But it would be great to see the shovels in the dirt and the fence up at the Regent to help transform our downtown. So hopefully by our next meeting, we'll be watching just that. With that, we'll move on to item 6C, Pope Road South Drive intersection. Councillor Doiron. Councillor.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. I don't have really a specific request for this, and I know Bruce has a bit of a piece to this as well. Although when it comes to intersection infrastructure, I know we've done a lot more sort of at a lot less busier places. So maybe with that in mind, Pope and South, now that we have the roundabout at Central and the work coming up with the East-West Corridor and the work coming up at Greenwood and Pope, it seems like it might be the new sort of weakest link on that stretch in terms of I don't know, congestion. Minus, I guess, kind of, you could argue that Duke Street and Pope might be a bit of a spot too, but I think that one, there's a lot more alternatives in that area where you don't really have to turn on to Pope from Duke. But at Pope and South, at certain times of the day, it gets pretty difficult to see things and to turn left from either approach. And I guess I'm just wondering, since we have the work at those other two locations, if it might be time to explore what, if anything, may be sort of warranted at that spot. Councillor Bruce, I know you had a couple of discussions recently and with respect to monies that were available or allocated in our budget for traffic calming and that sort of thing. So just wanted to sort of put it out there for discussion. I'm not really seeking that we direct staff to do anything, but it just kind of seems to be sort of that one remaining spot there, and especially now with the active transportation lane that will soon eventually be the whole distance on Pope. So maybe it's time to look at that spot, because that's kind of the intersection of two fairly busy places.
I just note that, actually, even before you brought it up, Councillor Doiron, that is on the list for staff to get traffic counts this fall. You're right, it is, it's almost like there's one time a day that it's busy, but there's certainly one or two times a day where it's certainly a heavier traffic flow than at other times. But staff's plan is to get the traffic data at that intersection through the fall and come back to council with recommendations on whether or not there should be something done.
Yeah, great. I guess that's all I was sort of looking for. And I guess just to add to that, there is the pedestrian sort of element to that as well, especially with the AT lane coming. It's quite common that vehicles will basically pull out onto the crosswalk to see where their sort of available is. So, yeah, just that other element to throw in there. So, no, that's all I really wanted to just bring it up and see where we were on it and see where we might be going on it. So, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Councillor Doiron, for bringing this up. I had mentioned to our CAO a few weeks ago, and he was going to follow up on it, but we had money set aside in the budget for traffic calming, and this was mentioned during the budget process to review this intersection and also to review West Drive intersection. First thing this morning, I was met by a guy. He says, "I want you to come down and stand on my step." And we have nothing to slow the traffic down from the St. Eleanor's Irving to the light at the Journal. it's a straight through. We have a flash and warning sign that by Glen Drive, that's probably 10 to 15 kilometers over every time somebody goes through there. And then now that school has started, there's a real traffic congestion there a couple of times a day with the school buses turning in and out, right? So I think it's time that we had a real good look at this, and there may be an easy solution, I don't know. So anyway, appreciate whatever we can do. Thanks.
Councillor Snow?
And it's not on South or Pope, but when you said traffic calming, and I can't think of the street name, it would be the vacant councillor's seat. But we put some cement ballards or something, yeah, Craig. So we put some cement things up there. What do they call it?
A temporary chicane,
Yeah, temporary chicane, and I drove by the other day, and one chicane's pretty much in the ditch, and the other's so far to the sidewalk. I don't think that's the purpose of those pieces of work. You can drive 3 vehicles through it, so my understanding is they're supposed to narrow the street. So I went through the other day and I was thinking that is not how those are supposed to be set up. So if we could get somebody just up there to look at those, I don't know if anybody mentioned it, but it definitely is noticeable that it's not set up correctly.
Councillor Doiron?
Yeah, just something I forgot to sort of add as an afterthought related to Pope and Greenwood. I know there's tendering process that we're working through, but do we have sort of an update on the timeline? I know it was supposed to be tendered in August, and it's not August anymore, but do we have a rough estimate for when that work might be started? And again, I know the lights at Pope and Greenwood, and I know it's related, and it's part of the same project as the AT, and that's probably what's holding it up, and that's fine. It was just sort of looking for a rough update.
project, once that tender's awarded, is set to begin immediately. And everything to be complete by, I think it was November 25th.
Yep, all good. I just wanted to let everyone know that it's still going ahead, because people are watching the calendar, and when you say it's gonna start in August, they're looking for work to start in August, but no, we know why, and no, that's fine, thanks.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Also, just a quick note, currently with Standing Committee on Planning Board, the complete street design is under review, so in terms of traffic calming measures, I think that's what the objectives are here. Sometimes I'm not quite sure what exactly the objective is, but if it is to slow vehicles down to make our streets safer, that is under review, as that is a requirement in our official plan. So I'm hoping that will come forward to all of council soon, and that would be a more comprehensive look on how we design our streets and how that impacts how people travel through our community. Quick question, CAO, is Pope Road an arterial on our, is it identified as an arterial? It's collector, okay. Which one is it? Yeah, I'm just curious what okay. No further comments, questions from council. We're gonna hear back from CAO and staff doing a review. Item 60, Brockville Street property, Councillor Morrison. Councillor?
Thanks, Brian. This property, I call it the old Brockville Street fertilizer plant, and I don't know the exact number or address. And anyway, I believe it changed hands, I'm going to say a little over a year ago. I'm not sure exactly when. And I'm not exactly sure what the plan is to buy it, or what the purchasers plan to do with it. But I get a few calls on it, and I drove around, it's 2 or 3 weeks ago now. And it's in rough shape, but the biggest issue, if you compare it to a few of the other places we've had in town that are an issue, if there was one beauty about one in particular, it had an 8-foot chain link fence surrounding it. Well, this property has nothing like that. And it has siding on the south side of it. I call it a tower in the center of it, but on the south side of that tower, where it fastens onto the rest of the building or meets the roof line, there's a huge gap or a huge hole in that building in the siding and I don't even know if it's vinyl or wood or what all is there, but it blows off in this windstorm. So we're getting into the time of year where we have Fionas and whatnot happen, and then it leads into winter after that. So the neighbors deal with it, with the stuff that blows off the building. So you have the siding is one issue. The other issue is the asphalt shingles. And on the western half of the building, both on the north and south sides, there's big empty spots where shingles are gone. And what happens is they blow off the building and they don't stay in their property. It ends up on Brockville Street or on Harvard Street or on Noonan Street, and I'm not sure the other one right behind it, around ADL's property. And anyway, it does damage. There's one gentleman for sure, and I can't remember now if he replaced a window in his car or a window in his house because it did damage, but he deals with it constantly. And the other side of it is, even if it doesn't do any damage to anybody's property in the area, then after the storm, they have to go out and all clean up their yards. So I was just wondering if there's been any comments or any suggestions, or if anybody has talked to the new owners, or if there's a plan in place, or if we know any ideas of what may take place there, and if there's not, and I don't want to be in the middle of telling someone else, I know you're buying properties for future investments, and good things are probably going to happen, and sometimes we just get a little impatient in the meantime waiting for it, and it's tough on the neighbors. So I'm just wondering if there was, anybody knows of any plans, and if there's no plans in the near future, is there such a thing that we could get them to tighten the building up a little bit in such a way that the neighbors aren't dealing with the stuff that blows off it?
Can I just ask, so when you're coming into town and you pass by Staples, if you look off to your right, is that big white, okay, that's attached to that building? I just noticed that the other day. It's like, there's holes right through it. Okay.
Yeah,
That's
the
same.
top part has, I don't know, it's probably only a foot or two there, but on the bottom part, I bet you there's a spot, it's 10 by 10, or it might be 20 by 20, where it's wide open. So you got livestock, you got wildlife and stuff in and out of there, which probably isn't good. And you're probably gonna have, as the weather gets colder, maybe people camping out inside, and then it's certainly probably gonna become a bit of a fire issue, and there could be a whole lot of bad things happen there. So I'm just wondering if, how secure the building is, or what their plans are, and you're not gonna spend, I mean, for all I know, they could be tearing it down in a year or two, so you're not gonna go out and spend, I get you don't wanna spend a whole bunch of money on something you're gonna tear down, if that's the plan. But I'm just wondering if we can talk to somebody, or, try to relieve a few of the issues for the people that are living in the neighborhood. They shouldn't have to deal with that. If we can tidy it up or help get it tidied up in some way, shape, or form, it would probably be a feather in our cap.
Yeah, I'll answer, Councilor. I got a couple of comments there. I met with the gentleman who had the shingle. It was a rear window of his vehicle, and a couple of the other neighbors along there with the shingles. And I think again, I'm going on memory, but I think the owners tried to resolve it with some sort of financial thing, but I'm not sure anyone was super happy with how it all shook out. Two pieces. One, I have met with the new owners and the ownership group. We met with them, gosh, I don't know if you were there, Gordon, Economic Development was there. They were interested in developing the site into a housing, row house, townhouses, development, apartment, whatever. And we listened to them. They presented their information and showed other projects that they were working on, and I put them in contact with our Economic Development Department. So you may want to speak to Economic Development to see if that, thank you, Councillor. There we go. To see if that's moved any further along, but I've heard nothing since from them on that. The second piece is this raises a secondary issue. When we did look at it, I did look at it with that individual resident, and really the recourse for a resident would be the same if you had a tree on your property and it fell onto my property and damaged my car. My recourse wouldn't be through the city, it would be through suing you in small claims court. But it does highlight a secondary issue with the number of buildings in the city. That building in particular is not the only one with holes on it or siding being pulled off. Take a drive up Jennifer Street, you'll see a few. Take a walk out along the boardwalk and you'll see a building that's got all kinds of interesting developments. And the two questions, and I guess I had asked about this before in terms of how we go about enforcing our building code post the issuance of permit. So I know I've asked this before, and I'm not sure we do much after the fact. It had come up, not in reference to this building, but in reference to a couple of buildings on Jennifer Street. We had then contacted the province that the fire marshal would come in, but that was it. But whether there are structural issues with buildings that the city is concerned about, question I guess to CAO would be, is that something our building inspector can follow up on?
Short answer is yes. In regards to the Brockville Street or the old fertilizer plant, I know it's been on the radar of bylaw enforcement last fall, and there was some communication back then, so I'll ask them to reach back out on that property. The larger, we'll have to have some further discussion on the building code. Our building officer does certainly visit properties and do inspections from under the Building Act to determine life safety issues. But to what extent is certainly an open question, and how much authority they have, so we'll dig a little deeper into that.
Yeah, Council, I don't know, that's not a resolution. Are you comfortable leaving it where it is for now, or?
Yeah, I just, yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot we can do about it. You know, I just want to bring it up and make it, people aware of it, and maybe there is a little pressure we can apply, or, you know, just to make it easier for the people in that neighborhood, and like say, both on Brockville and Harvard Street, but even in behind, depending on, you know, the wind will be out of the north most of the winter, once it switches, and so there could be people on many or any side that's going to have issues or problems down there, and, you know, if some way it can be tightened up or helped out a little bit, that it'll solve some of those problems, that would be great. And I know, I spoke to CAO Gordon about it a few times, and I know he's been working on it as well as the bylaw people, and but if we can, you know, hopefully something new will happen, and that'll alleviate a whole lot of problems, so. Thank you.
So is it a vacant property? Is there anything in it?
It used to have I used to
According
keep, I
to-
used to store
according to
something
our
in there
bill with
back in the day, but I'm not sure what's inside now. I don't
You
know
used
if there's
to
still, they used to store stuff in there.
Yeah, because, I mean, when,
It
years
was
ago,
storage.
when we moved, we stored things in there, but it's changed owners since, so I'm just wondering, like, I guess, like you said, like, it's been ongoing for years, like, if we're putting, like, vacant property bylaws and such into place, and we have our bylaw officer, it's not like the problem's getting any better if it's still happening 2 years later, so why aren't we acting on it?
I think a couple things. One, I don't think it's vacant. There are uses going on in the building. Again, going off memory, I think the bylaw officer did issue an order, or at least had communication with the property owner. And again, I'm going off memory, but I think last fall, and there were some level of repairs done to meet whatever the order was. And then there's been further deterioration since then, so we'll make sure we're back on it from a unsightly perspective. And if there are building structural issues, then, and, you know, holes in walls or holes in ceilings, and that's something that we can deal with as well.
Yeah, just to point out, so there's actually 3 separate buildings down there, of which one was the fertilizer plant and had office space in it. That office space is now, I believe, 2 apartments. And I'm sure they're perfectly fine. Like in that area, the building is fine. And then the 2 buildings that are next to it, one is definitely being used for storage, or was all along. I don't know if it is today. And the 3rd building is actually being used by one of the taxi stands, I believe. So there's people there every day and in the area and in the buildings next door. And like I say, other than the apartment building, I'm not sure. I think they used to put you know, you could probably put, in the wintertime, boats or trailers and stuff that were in the bigger part, but I still don't know if that, I don't know if that still happens today, and to say, the building's not gonna fall down, I just would love to see them tighten it up a little bit, so the stuff's not flying off it, hitting cars or homes, and that would be helpful.
Great, okay, so we're gonna follow up. Good stuff. Did you, sorry, just the last question, Councillor, did you hear that recently? Because I had heard that, like I said, about a year ago, and then I hadn't heard anything since, so I'm just curious if it's been coming up again. Yeah, okay, great. Well, not great, but good to know, thank you. New inquiries, okay. Any further comments, questions? None from council. Move on to item E. This is both myself and Councillor Snow. Corey, do you want to lead it off? Do you want me to?
It doesn't matter, I can lead it off. So, within the package, you'll notice there is a signed petition, maybe we'll call it, or, what would you call it, a petition or approval? Residents in the area have, been in touch with Mayor Kutcher, myself, regarding a dog park in the, vacant park area, just north of North Market Street. And they have taken it upon themselves, after discussion with Mayor Kutcher, to contact residents in the area living in close proximity, bordering the park area, regarding the possibility of putting a dog park in that area. So this is an area that I remember being a kid, we'd go and play there and play ball and catch and that sort of stuff, but it's underutilized area for the most part. It's an area we still upkeep, but hearing the possibility of a dog park being in the area and hearing from residents that really have been looking for this, although we already have a dog park, but adding additional dog park space is something that definitely intrigues me, and with residents in the area being okay with it, I think it's something we definitely should look at and pursuing moving forward as soon as possible.
Yeah, great. I think that sums it up. The key point, residents came and said this is something we'd like to have. This is a space that currently isn't being utilized. And asked them to go knock on the doors of all the neighbors that back onto the park, and they did, and brought in the list, and everybody said we're okay with that, we'd be happy to do that. So I guess it would be a question as to whether or not we can then explore what funding costs would be for a simple dog park in that space that probably wouldn't take up the entire space, and then probably some agreement with the residents to make sure that it's maintained to a certain level. That sometimes happens, but the broader, bigger question, which you may recall I brought forward to budget last time around, was the idea of exploring additional bark parks, dog parks throughout our city. While we have 16,500 residents, we probably have approximately 5,000 dogs, just so everybody knows. They are in almost every other home across our city, and dog parks are not only good for the pets, they're also good for residents and neighbors to spend time with each other, meet each other, get out. And where we only have one right now, we get a lot of people who actually get in the car and drive to the dog park as opposed to walk to one in their neighborhood. So if this is an opportunity to explore the possibility of setting up some smaller bark parks in and around our community and starting with one, certainly be something would be encouraged. Councillor Cameron?
Two things. First, I did have a resident reach out when the package came out who wanted to be against a dog park in the neighborhood, lives around the area, maybe a little bit further than where the, I don't know, are we calling it a petition? What?
I don't know what you
Yeah,
call it.
petition seems like it's a negative
Yeah.
thing to say, but anyway, a little bit further than that, but still in the area, was not for having a dog park in the area. That being said, someone who has 2 dogs and would love to take my dog to a dog park. I hope that if we look at this, we can maybe see the things that don't necessarily work well at the other dog park. That is people with small dogs, much like myself. Mine are probably the size of a cat. Don't necessarily always get a chance to use the dog park because when there are bigger dogs there, they tend to trample the small ones. If there is a way, I've seen it before, and when I lived in Halifax, they had a dog park where it was 2 separate ones, but you also have a communal area between where you can have small dogs, big dogs, just so that more people can utilize it, because I would go way more often if my dogs could interact with dogs who are similar sizes. And I'm sure that there are other people in the city who would feel very similarly. That being said, sometimes they like big dogs. Sometimes they don't like big dogs. So it all depends on your dog, but I know that it would encourage more people to go if we had kind of some separation there. So if we're going to go forward, that would be a good thing to look at.
I think the good thing about this location is there is ample space to look at some of those things. And to the other point about a resident that might not live directly abutting the property, I personally, not to diminish that whoever it is, I don't know who it is, it could be somebody that votes for me or doesn't, but I wouldn't take that as strong as people living directly abutting it, because there's no difference of a dog park being in the area as a dog walking by your house. So it would be just, yeah, I guess to that point. There's been a lot of work, and when I look at the names on the petition, there's a lot that live in very close proximity to the dog park. So it shows that there is some definite support in the area.
Councillor Morrison?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment too. I do realize there's a park, but it is a little out of the way, the other dog park, and there used to be another one down by Suregain at the bottom of Ottawa Street that at one time I had a dog I got gifted, a huge dog. So I had to get, and he was actually he was amazingly, I used to go to the park, I'd wait till after dark and take him in by myself because I was scared he'd eat anybody else or their dogs but anyway, I got used to him pretty quick and realized he wasn't one bit like that. And anyway, it was a lot of fun. I took him there almost daily. It was very healthy both for me and him, and socialize for him and talk to other people. I think that's a space that's sat there vacant for 50 or 60 years. I can remember it, so I think it would come in handy. I think it's a great idea, and I'm sure there's enough space there. You could fence off a corner of it even to separate a little bit so great idea, and I think it should move forward.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Maybe what we can do for next steps is cost plan and then return to council. The costs, these are sometimes not huge costs, these types of projects, so, and plan it out, and great input there, Councillor Cameron. And maybe it'll return in the future. I'd love to have Summerside designated to work towards being a pet-friendly city. There are a lot of things that we're already doing in our community, but there's a lot of other things that we can be doing to, again, encourage the socialization of people in our community and get people out. That's the key piece to this. So we can do that, cost it, plan it, and return to council. So everyone's good? Great, taking right along. 6F, speed bump, Willow Avenue, Councillor Cameron. Councillor?
Thank you, Your Worship. There are currently 2 speed bumps on Willow, one that is relatively new, closer towards SIS. There is a pre-existing one right outside of Elm Street School on the corner of Northumberland and Willow, and it is worn down to basically nothing, to the point where when I drive over it, I myself don't even slow down because it does nothing. Just hoping that maybe we can get that looked at to perhaps build it back up again so that people do slow down. There's been some issues that have been brought forward from residents and parents of the school, as well as people who are at the racetrack as well, moving horses kind of back and forth across the street. There's school, dome, turf. There's a lot that happens right in that area, and if we can slow them down a little bit, that would be great.
What do we have on Elm Street? Because those, you can't miss those.
Those are ramps.
Yeah,
The
those
view
you get
hit
air on
those.
those.
Those are humps and not bumps, remember?
There's, humps are high. That's how,
Yeah.
right? Okay. So we
There's
need-
definitely no speeding with
No,
those humps, or
no.
you are bottoming out your car for
Yeah,
sure.
okay. Yeah, those are good. Slow it down anyway, especially around a school. Yep.
So can staff look at bumping that up? I never get to do those kind of terrible jokes. Yeah, I know. Yeah, sorry, Justin. Scoped you. And get back to Councillor Cameron, and again, when we come back on the complete streets, I think that should be all part of traffic calming, slowing traffic where we want to, but where there are areas, particularly there's an area if there's an existing speed bump, to make sure that they are kept up. Great. Item 6G, Councillor Snow, unsightly properties, Poplar and Chestnut.
Thank you, Your Worship. So everybody will have in their package a picture of what some of my constituents, and the two of them are in the gallery tonight, get the pleasure of looking at through their front window and through their side windows, and all the other residents on the street get to drive by every day and call me and send me messages regarding the issue. So everybody can take a good look at that picture and consider what that would be like living beside for what's going on a couple of years now, I would say, between construction, if not longer. So in there, you'll also see notices from the city to the owner of the property in question here, that you have the picture of regarding uptake or upkeep and getting it back to a point where it doesn't look the way it does. Very little has been done, although you'll see construction was ongoing for some point. New windows and stuff were put in, then everything was taken out. There's definitely some legal issues going on right now between ownership and banks and so on. That being said, I don't think that's an issue that we as a municipality should be concerned about. Our issue should be residents in that area have some significant concerns with that structure, and so should we as a municipality. I also asked that Chestnut be added on there as well. There's a property, I believe it's, and geez, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's 405. Make sure we get the right one. And if it's not 405, I'm sorry, whoever owns 405, but 405 Chestnut, it's been vacant for an ongoing amount of time as well. Windows busted out, owner not in the province, there's no power, water, correct, to the property, Gordon? And it sits there with residents in the area also emailing, questioning why these properties take so long. So a couple things. I'm requesting as a council that we put an order forward from mayor and council to have these brought back to respectable order or demolished within a time frame. And also I'd like to, and we've talked about this prior, to the point, well, I need to say that I'm a little bit disappointed because as a council, if all the council recalls, or the councils that were there here the last term, we went through a whole thing where we did a vacant premises bylaw, to the point where we created a new bylaw. Paid probably good money to legal as a city. And then just recently, we've been told that it doesn't have the teeth required. So I'm very concerned that we allow properties of this state to go on for the length of time that we do without having some sort of teeth to address that. I just know if I was living beside it or in the area, I would be really concerned. I met with the residents in the area in the living room, looked over at it, and it's not a site that anybody would want to live beside. There's pieces falling off, there's rodents and so on. Within some of the letters here, it has mentioned that failure to comply with certain things, there'd be fines levied and so on. I just don't think we take a strong enough stance on these. It's no surprise to any of my fellow councillors, as I talked about other properties throughout the city in past years. I would like, one, for us to address these two properties, because I think they are long past being needed to be addressed for starters, and then finally get whatever teeth we need in our vacant premises bylaw, because that could then fall under some of the properties we already talked about tonight. I think there's a number of properties throughout the city that sit in a state where they're vacant and there's no deterrent for owners to do anything about it. And until we, as a municipality, address those properties, we will continue to have residents that have to live beside these properties and frankly not be happy. And I don't blame them one bit. I said to the residents that I met with and anybody I talked to, whether or not through email or text, that I don't blame you. I agree 100% with you. I would be in the exact same position you guys are if it was beside me. So I think as a council, we owe it to the residents that are currently dealing with this and any residents that might have to deal with it in the future to make sure we address this property and future properties appropriately.
Councillor McCollum?
It's a really important point that you're bringing up, Deputy Mayor Snow. The only thing I'm wondering about is, depending on the legal matters that are going on with the property, if there's a mortgage or if there's any kind of a conflict with the, the contractor or whatever, where would the city fall if there's liens on it or if there's anything like that? Where would we be able to step in if we put more teeth into our bylaw? How would we address that? Because if it's caught up in legal situations, I don't think the city would be number one on the list that we could step in, I don't think. I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm just wondering about that.
And that's a valid point, Councilor Coleman. I'm not a lawyer either. I just think as a municipality, we owe it to
Right.
the public to do whatever we need to do on our end, regardless of the situation of the ownership or what might happen or might not happen with that property in the future. We should be doing what we need to do and lien the property accordingly, which we have done some cleanup services of the property, and I've checked with CAO that we have been billing it back to the property. Whether or not there's a demolition, the same thing, we should bill it back to the property. It's not, as a municipality, I don't believe it's our responsibility to worry about that legal ownership part. Our responsibility is to the residents to address the property accordingly, regardless of the ownership, who owns it. So whether or not it's I that own it or the bank or anybody, I think we should address it accordingly. So the current state of these properties are in really rough shape, and you're asking for something bad to happen, and I think we need to address that accordingly and do it now, because it's been going on way too long.
Councillor McDougall?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Deputy Mayor, for bringing this up. I was contacted a couple of times by residents there and had talked to you about it. It's disgusting to see that building stand in there and us not be able to do anything about it. I'm very disappointed to hear that the bylaw that we paid to get teeth in, apparently there's teeth missing, so we need to get that fixed. That, we go out and we pay money to have things like that drawn up, and then when it's tested, it's no good. That's not right, and that's not what the residents pay good taxes for. We need to put some real teeth into anything that we take to get done. This is a prime example of what needs to be done. There's that place, the other place you were talking about, and I know there's other places around town that we need to get serious on. And some of them, I just can't believe we're leaving them the way they are, so thank you.
Councillor Cameron?
Thank you, Your Worship. One, I completely agree with the statements made. Through committee work, we have started looking at that bylaw, so we are doing dental work on that bylaw to get it some teeth. Still very early stages of that, but it has come up through the Bylaw Governance and Communications Committee, so hopefully something will come soon.
Councillor Morrison?
Say, just shy of 2 years since I've been here, so I think it's the first time that I got to discuss this particular property, and I am aware of the one on Chestnut, or at least I got a picture in my mind, so I think I'm on the right one. I'm very much a live and let live type of person. But I can tell you this, if I was living next door to that, I wouldn't be a little bit happy, or across the street. And I don't know whose name it is. It's my understanding it's now in a bank's name, and I could be wrong on that, but, and it doesn't matter which bank, but that's what it wouldn't take me too long to say, in gambling even with the city's money on this, but anyway, 30 or 60 days in, give whoever owns it a notice and say, if it's still like that in 30 or 60 days, I'm gonna fix it for you. Yeah, by tearing it down.
That's where I think
Yeah,
that's.
and
honestly
I'm all for that. The people that live next door to it, like I say, and across the street that have to look at it and suffer the consequences. And again, like I say, I'm very much a hands-off of somebody else's stuff, but this is a little too far down the road to be, yeah, it's time to do something there, no question. So they've lived with that long enough, and I think the right thing to do would be for the city, yeah, to fix it, fix the situation.
Councillor McColman and then Councillor Adams.
Just an afterthought on what we were talking about legally. I'm just wondering if we're talking about having another look at it to see where the city could, get involved, stepped in, fix it, or whatever the situation may be. Would there be any way that we would be able to get external legal information on when something becomes into that kind of a situation? Would there be something that could be written into a clause so that if there is any kind of a problem with the look of the property falling into disarray and having an effect on residents, is there something, an add-on clause or whatever that could be done to give the city that power to do something without getting into a problem of lawsuits or that kind of thing? I don't know what the terminology would be, but somebody external might be able to kind of guide us through that, or through Director Kendra.
So my understanding, I have had some discussions with CAO over the last week or number of days. I think we do have that ability now to issue a notice of demolition if they don't comply. And I do believe that's the appropriate step, given where we're at in the current circumstance. So, again, correct me if I'm wrong there, Gordon, but that's my understanding.
Yeah, maybe just to clarify a few things. The vacant, because we're talking about, we're kind of using terms interchangeably, and the vacant premises bylaw was brought in very quickly with I would suggest limited thought put towards how we would administer it. It's not whether or not, and Councillor Cameron's correct, it's on the list for bylaw governance and communications to review. And I know staff are in the process of doing that. But the crux of that bylaw was adding a special, basically a tax on vacant premises. And so that's that piece. These two properties, we do have the teeth. Our bylaw allows us to give an order to bring a property up to a certain standard or have it demolished. And so staff are in agreement that both properties in question were likely at that point. A little details on both of them though. The Chestnut property, we had an inquiry from the owner just within the last few weeks around the process for a demolition permit. So they inquired about the process and then haven't moved any further. So a new order on that property may spur that process on. But on that property anyway, there was another order in place to keep the grass cut and keep that work done, and that has been done throughout the summer. On the Poplar Street property, again, it's not a matter of the teeth per se, but these things do take time. On this property, there was an owner who had a mortgage, who then walked away from the construction and the renovation. The bank, as recently as today, and Director Kendra has been in touch with them, I'll say on a bi-weekly basis, over the last number of months, trying to get an update and a timeline from them on what they intend to do. They still haven't acquired legal title to the property. They have been paying to make sure the grass has been cut and the garbage has been picked up. But to Councillor Snow's point, that the ownership being in question makes things drag on and makes it harder to get answers from people and what their intentions are, but it doesn't necessarily limit our ability. And make staff's in agreement that it's time that we write new orders on both properties to either bring them up to acceptable standards or demolish them. So again, Rick, to your point, there would likely be a 60-day timeline on those, and then if they weren't done, we'd be back to council with a resolution for the city to move forward and do that and bill the property owner.
Is 60 the minimum or the maximum or the recommended, or is it?
I would say 60 days would be the recommended based on normal practices. It's to tell someone do something or we're gonna demo your property within 30 days is could likely be seen as too quickly if somebody challenged it.
Okay.
But
So I'd rather 30 or 15 or 5, but I'm okay with 60 if we're proceeding with 60. If we're not, I don't want to. Again, I sat with the residents and I said, you know what, I'm concerned we go so far down the road and then we, it changes hands and then somebody else has these big lavish plans that drag on for another year and a half of, I really think we do a poor job of, and I don't mean it towards staff and although it's coming across that way, I'm sure, but I think we do a poor job of addressing these type of issues as a city, and it does absolutely nothing but negative for our city right across the board. So we have to, and we owe it to our residents again to do something as quickly as possible. So if it's 60 days and we can live with that as a council and it gets things moving along, then it gets it addressed. I'm okay with doing that.
Kendra, I'll come to you in 2 seconds, which is Councillor Adams, and then Director Gunn.
I'll just be really quick, thank you, Worship. We went through this out in the ward I represent, and it was misery. Mine was a little different because there was people living in it, and we were trying to get it deemed uninhabitable, which it was times 100. But there was so many things. It was brought up that our fire department can't go in and make that call, and it had to go through the province. And I don't know why we take that away from, I'm not sure if it's the province takes it away or if it's a decision we make as a city, because somebody has said to me that Charlottetown Fire can make that call when a place is a fire hazard and not to be lived in. So I really think we should look at that, because somewhere like this where, people can crawl in and, we've had events on the island happen before where people aren't where they're supposed to be, and, there's been deaths occur because of fire. So I think our firefighters, they know, and we're putting them in a position to go in and fight fires and save lives, and it doesn't have to be that way. I don't think it's fair. So I'd really like us to look into why our fire officials can't do it, and if Charlottetown is doing it, what are they doing that gives them the power over to be able to do that? We really need to do that for our residents and for our firefighters. And the other part was, when the province came in to deem, we requested, we begged and pleaded for them to come in. Finally, police were able to get the province to come and look. The province was there, they agreed that it was beyond living conditions, told the neighbors that when they were on site, told city officials that. By the time they got back to Charlottetown, it was appropriate to live in. So there's something amiss. with how that gets decided. It's obviously not in the best interest of the people that live there or in the residents. And the other part, and I know it's probably not something that should be suggested, but I had gotten the number for the bank that owned the place, and we called that lawyer for that bank, and we gave the number to everybody that asked, and we called and called and called until they were pretty darn sick of listening to us. And I remember we were on vacation out of country, and he was like, still answering the phone. It was, he was like, I'm getting so many calls about this. So people care, and I think we really take away from the people that want the best for the city, and they want the best for their street, and they work hard with sometimes a little bit that they have to put up with this beside them. So I just think we can do way better in a few different ways, so.
So how do we proceed here?
Director Gunn's gonna speak.
So
Okay.
we can issue an order to bring the property up to standard or face demolition. The notice period should not be less than 15 days because they have a right to appeal within 14 days of receipt of the order. And
45 days then?
well, in order for an actual demolition order to go out, it has to be through council. So there'd have to be an order through council. It's not something that can be done without council ordering that. I'm talking under the unsightly property bylaw process.
So I guess the reason why I'm asking, so would that have to happen at, that order from council, would it have to happen at a monthly council meeting? Could it happen at a?
Special meeting, it could
special meeting?
happen whenever council
Like, I'm
meets.
trying
Just
to
correct,
begin.
correct me if I'm wrong, the first step is for staff to issue the order.
Correct.
To clean it up.
Right,
Or
face demolition.
face a demolition. Then if it's not cleaned up within that certain amount of time, then it comes back to council for the
Who can
resolution.
issue a demolition order.
Right. So we can issue an order to have them cleaned up, brought up to standard within anywhere between 15, 30, 60. I'm suggesting that 60 days would be
I would like,
reasonable, but if you want it to be shorter, we
I would
can do
like it
shorter
to
as well.
align with, somewhat with our council meeting, so we don't end up, so it doesn't end up being 90 days or 120 days, or, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I just, that's why I was asking the
Right.
timeline, like if 45 days brings us to November council meeting, or 30 days brings us to November council meeting, I think that gives them enough time to consider what they're going to do with the property, especially since both these properties have had a ton of time to figure out what they're gonna do with the property.
Yeah, but I suggest we have the order, the timeline line up for our October monthly council meeting. So if it's,
Yeah,
you'd be able to have a resolution at that
And-
meeting if it's not done.
I like it, yeah, okay.
And would that order, would that have to be working days, calendar working days? Like Monday through Friday, weekends, or?
I don't believe so, or.
No, it's just days.
Yep.
Perfect.
A quick question on that as well, Kendra. Orders are appealable then as well?
Correct.
Yeah, just. As a lawyer, sometimes you don't want to get into appeals can take an incredibly long time, so
Yeah,
that's sometimes why you don't want to box someone in the shortest period of time, because they may just simply say, there was the shortest period of time, I'm going to appeal, and then you're into an appeal process that is certainly takes much longer than 60 days.
That may be part of the thought process in giving them a longer period to contemplate. I'm talking the bank in the instance
It's the
of
bank, right,
Poplar,
it's the time.
trying to move them along, but this has been ongoing for quite some time. And it surprises me that they still don't have title to the property, but I'm not sure how that
Right.
process
That might be, make it easier.
works. Because our bylaw talks about issuing the order to who owns the property. And if the individual who owns the property is the previous person, we're not, you know, the comment from the previous person has been, I no longer own the property. And they have no contact with the property and they have no,
So I guess again, my comment would be, let's proceed regardless, I don't care. I personally do not care who owns the property, I care about the residents that live around that property and call and email me constantly, and I know, hopefully they don't think I'm not doing anything, but that's the impression. If I was there and calling somebody constantly saying, could we do something with this property, what's going on, and nothing was getting done, I would assume that person's not doing anything, and that's farthest from the truth, and I really want this property addressed. Whether or not it's 15 days, 30, it needs to happen now. I guess I'll just leave it.
Great, I think you've got the unanimous support of council and mayor as well on that, Councillor Snow. And I know that you, back to Councillor Cameron's point, bylaws and governance to separating the two issues from the two subject properties, but also from the vacant premises bylaw. You initiated that work originally, and you initiated that work to make sure that it has the appropriate mechanisms to make sure that it is easily enforceable and something that we can action without having to wait for people to apply to register their vacant premises. That's it sounds like it's about time to deal with some of these properties, which is great.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Move on to section 7, items A, B, and C, CAO updates. We'll start with A, east-west corridor update. CAO?
Aaron was gonna come and do this. Okay. Okay, good.
Good evening, Horace. I guess I was asked to come in and give you an update on the east-west. I guess the first phase was starting at Water Street East. This is an aerial shot from Water Street East. It cuts up between some vacant land, crosses, if you can see this on your screen, it crosses the trail, runs up to the middle of a farm, cuts across the top and ends, this half ends at the trail up to the Rotary Park. There also is a connection, there'll be more pictures there that show it, make it a connection over to the top of Gillian Street at the Woodridge Trailer Park, I guess you call it. So this first part included all the underground piping in the first half, as well as the shale and gravel. They've also, in this half, I guess, or just a quick recap, this road is one lane each way, as well as a on-street parking lane, so it's similar to McEwen Road. In addition to this, there's also going to be a sidewalk on one side and an active transportation lane on the other side. So they are pretty well at there's some equipment, there might be some other pictures here that'll pop up, but they are up as far as the trail now. Starting to place shale and stuff north of that and heading north. The next tender has been closed. The work will continue where this tender stopped. I guess this shot here is right at the trail. The equipment's now doing the road bed heading north. The next tender is set to start in the middle of September. We're waiting for the crop on a couple of fields to finish, and this tender to get closer to finish as well. The contractor has advised they'll start in mid-September and work until weather permits this fall, at the rails, I'll say the trail to Rotary Friendship Park, cutting across the top two fields and end of Collin towards Walker. They can't go all the way across to McEwen Road as there's a late crop in that field, so he's told the farmer we would wait until that crop was removed. There's another shot here at the other end. Now I'm in the air at Ryan Street. Athena School is here on the right. There's a couple of lots here that have been for sale for a few months, private owner. The road goes out between those, cuts through this farmer's field, through the trees, and I'd have to zoom in and across in the distance. You can see the first phase is coming up in the horizon through there. So that's kind of the second phase as well. At the first picture I showed you that at Water Street, it will be in the final phase, a 3-way signalized intersection. At this end at McEwen, it will be a 4-way signalized intersection. Again, the schedule is for the contractor to start in September, work as long as they can until late November perhaps, come back in the spring. If they have time, they may start on this entranceway as well. Then in the spring, they'll complete the pipe installation and rail bed or shale bed as well as gravels. And then in 2025, we'll be bringing forward as part of the budget process to pave the first half or pave it all, depending on how fast they complete this. Their original schedule shows phase 2 to be done in July of 2025, so we may have time to definitely pave the first half or pave it all. That'll be a discussion we'll have with you and options at budget time. That's the quick overview of what the project is and where we are to date. I don't know if you want more than that or you don't want to ask any questions, or I just wanted to highlight that we would have a connection, as we mentioned, into Gillian Street. There would be a connection at Collin. There'll be no connection at Walker and no connection at Maple Grove directly. They can loop back to other street networks to get onto this, but no direct connection onto it. And that's pretty much the quick recap. If you want to have any questions, I can zoom in. Or
Can you repeat that again, that there will be a connection with Gillian?
Gillian is the street on the
Onto
main
the-
street north and south of the trailer park.
Right.
Yeah.
But there'll be no connection to other streets?
There will be one, I'll have to check the name of it. There's, as part of phase 1,
Right.
we made a connection across right over to Gillian. There's a vacant field between that the developer brought forward and rezoned to you guys a couple of years ago.
Yes.
Was it
Well,
Cardinal?
Maybe it's Cardinal. It's one of the
It's
ones
one of the
just
bird
north of the
streets.
trail.
Yeah.
As part of their development, there is a stub street now onto that field.
Oh, yes, I know.
As
where it
part
is.
of their development, they'll connect from there over, and we've provided a stub in this street, so,
Okay,
but in your total control, there will be a connection over to Gillian. There'll be a second connection through the control of the development of that parcel of land.
okay, thanks.
Councillor Adams, and then Councillor Morrison, and then Councillor Doiron.
So, thank you, Aaron, this is great, and it's always interesting when you're going by and you can sort of see the progress. So on Water Street East, it's gonna be a 3-way signalized,
Yes,
right there. Okay, and is there going to be a crosswalk to get over to the sidewalk?
yes.
Okay.
I have the other drawings in another package, but it'll probably be a lot of me clicking to
Yeah.
find them, but I can, yeah.
Yeah, so it's active transportation on one side, sidewalk on the other.
Yes.
So, okay, so yeah, I get it now.
It'll be both. There'll be a crosswalk across this new street and then a new one across.
One of the sides.
Yeah.
Okay. And the Athena end, Ryan Street end, it would be a 4-way, and will it be the same? There will be
Yes.
a crosswalk?
It'd take me a second to.
Yeah.
That's this is the Athena section right here.
Yep.
And it'll come out into a 4-way. I go to one of the other there will be a slight off ramp there to hopefully take some of the intersection, some of the main right turn traffic heading to the northern section away from it, away from the intersection. But I can get to it. One of the further pages has the line markings of all the intersection on it, if you can bear with me for a second. And don't know how good that's.
So is that like Elizabeth Was that Elizabeth? That
So
was
right now, this is the Athena School,
Okay,
and right now we have a, I'll call it a very short slip lane there that they'll rework. And so again, there'll be the active transportation is on the north side. They'll have a little crosswalk across here, get to this little island. And then, sorry, in all four sections will be a smaller crosswalk type. That's what these single lines are across here, so they'll be able to come in all directions to connect on, because there will be a sidewalk on this side as well.
okay, so what does the future look like for getting that that active transportation, how it stops right there, yeah?
Yep.
Getting it to keep going around to where all those seniors live on Elizabeth and wherever that is, because I know I'm asked a lot, and I don't know, I'm not sure where it stands, but I'm asked a lot how we can get them access to the sidewalk on the other side of the road. So I'm wondering if that would be a roundabout way of,
Right now, their access though, again, I think we only have probably some streets in the old town, downtown, where we have sidewalk on both sides of the street. All of the locations we have sidewalk, unfortunately, just on one side of the street.
right,
Now, whether they can come up on a paved shoulder to this, but right now we haven't been designing on both sides. But again, that's whether this active transportation connects and goes north, or
right, okay.
again, if later on we approve the section of active transportation on Pope Road, you'll have an active transportation from South Drive to the Central Street,
Yep.
and then from Central Street to here. Then you'll have 2 kilometers from here out to Water Street East, so that's kind of your main middle of your city hub. But again, working off of that, after that or not, is a priority to be determined.
Okay, and when you say active transportation, do you mean a paved
Yes,
section?
when they say active transportation, as far as the people that actually do this for a living full time, active transportation is paved, and sidewalks are for people walking, jogging, strollers, but not bikes. And
Right. Okay, perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. I think Carrie covered 95% of what I was gonna ask, so I get the signal lights at both ends, Water Street and McCune Road.
correct.
And I think you said the word rework that merge lane up by Athena, so it'll be a little longer, and actually, because really there's no merge lane there, there's a,
Yeah, we haven't seen that. That'll be done in because right now the tender that's out is really all the underground piping
right.
and the up to the gravel. So we asked for them to, when we got this tender ready, we said we still have across that intersection, even though to be reworked. So we want them to do that in what will be the next tender that includes the curb, sidewalk, and paving. We said figure out what's going on with that intersection, that off lane there.
Thank you.
Just a question, prior to paving, I guess this fall, if the Gillian Street connection is made, is there any plans to have this sort of open to traffic, or not until paving is done?
No.
Okay.
It's
That's what I
not going to
thought,
be maintained, and the contractor will bring it up to a point of maybe about an inch or 2 below finished grade, so that whoever's going to come in do the paving, whether we had plows in there plowing it off or just gravel, or wheel ruts, or again, people driving on gravel roads versus. Yeah. I think the contractor will also probably put barricades. I think the contractor will actually put barricades across when they're done, to avoid, I'll say, the curious onlookers from taking a drive.
There we go. Can we just go back to the intersection? Yeah, so with this, where is that active transport lane hoping to go? Because right now it comes out to this little island, and then there's no crosswalk or anything for that.
I think when we look at the other one from Pope Road, when they got to major intersections, the riders were either asked to dismount and join the pedestrians as far as walking your bicycles, and beyond there, if there's no dedicated active lane there, to share the road and join what they're doing. I'll say in the 95% of the rest of the streets, they're sharing the road with, unless you have dedicated lanes for them.
Right, but on both of these corners, we are taking people out to this little island, and we've got nowhere for them to go from there. Like, there's no crosswalk that goes across the street,
Oh,
or
sorry, the one in black right
Yeah.
here is a different type of crosswalk. It's more
Okay.
we call it the zebra painting one. They would cross there,
Okay.
and they would either get on their bikes and head north, or get on here and head.
So this little square in the middle, that is, like, is that
I'll
4
zoom in a little
crosswalks? Does that
Yes.
make sense? Okay.
Is that better? So right
Yep.
now, they would either dismount here and either cross and wait here for signals to cross, and they'd either get on their
Okay.
bike and go back this way, or
Perfect.
maybe they would just jump on here and turn right in that right turn lane, or they would cross a couple times and then head south.
Sort of like at Reed's Corner now, how you jump across.
Again,
You know what I mean, Nick?
it's hard to believe I'm not a biker.
I guess I didn't like the square that's in the middle there.
Yeah.
It didn't look like the one that you pointed out, so I
Right.
assumed that there was nothing there, and it just looked like you were trapped
There's-
out on
there's-
the island. And
There's
couldn't
2
go
or
anywhere.
3 different types of levels of
Okay.
crosswalk, and that's what they proposed.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Great. Awesome. No, that's great.
Councillor Adams?
Yeah, I think Justin wanted to do a 3D crosswalk there. I was wondering about sitting down or having a chat with the manager of Woodridge, because I know she's getting a lot of questions about the development. So would that be something that maybe we?
Yeah,
could-
we've reached out, I think, a couple times, and I just recently reached out to make sure they were still the active person. I don't know if it's the manager. It's like if anyone has to do
Is it Lisa?
it might be, I think so, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
good.
That I just reached out to make sure that they were still the same contact, because we have had some email exchanges. I have sent the drawings to them to say, here's what the project was going on back and forth, but we'd like to still update them with more information. So I just verified just last week that she was still the same contact.
Perfect. And I know in addition to this, what we're seeing across the city is our unhoused population has started frequenting this area too. So that's something that the residents up there are dealing with, like multiple calls to the police daily. So I think just keeping her in the loop like you have been would be good, because then at least that line of communication with the city is.
And the contractors are there, at least on this site, they're still over the whole 2 kilometers, and they're there 7:30 to 7 as far as a 12-hour presence there, at least
Yes.
compared to other areas. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you, Aaron. Any further questions, comments? Hearing none from council, we'll now move on to the riveting subject of street sweeper schedules. CAO?
Sure.
I'd have an idea.
Yeah,
Put a
real
GPS
quick.
tracker in the street sweeper, and then that'll be that. But,
We track the routes on a daily basis, so.
all right, CAO
We
will
can
give the
validate.
first update, and then we'll.
Yeah, the question was asked basically what the schedule is on the street sweeper, so, I know some residents feel like they don't see it in their area very often, or it's a long time in between. Basically, when the season starts and the street sweeper first goes out for their first run of the city, it usually takes between 6 to 8 weeks. Takes a little longer during that run, based on the fact that there's more dirt and has to go back to the shop and empty out more often. But after that first run is done, then the city's divided from the street sweeper perspective, is divided into 3 main zones in the downtown zone. There's a kind of St. Helens section, a central section, and a Wilmot area section. The street sweeper is supposed to be on a 3 to 4 week schedule, so it should be in each area every 3 to 4 weeks. I know the question's been asked around weeds that grow up kind of in between the curb and the pavement. When the street sweeper goes through, it sometimes it can help knock those weeds down, obviously, but it doesn't remove those weeds. But the more often the sweeper is in, the cleaner it usually stays. So it's a long-winded answer by saying it's every 3 to 4 weeks the street sweeper should be in each area of town.
Thank you, Gordon. I might disagree with those weeks a little bit. I'm wondering, can we request that whatever schedule they have in place now of where they start and when they stop, let's reverse it?
Well, the last time the sweeper was in the Wilmot ward was the week of August 5th and 9th. So we are basically 4 weeks from that, and it should be out there again either mid this week or the first of next week. But there's no, like, by reversing it, it's there once a month, basically. Whichever way you start.
Okay. Anyway, it's fine if that's what they're saying, but I have trouble, and I know weather and stuff plays a big factor in it, but maybe if we could just look at how other cities do it and of a similar size and see, because it's like, you know, it looks really crappy. And people like we had this discussion, that if we're asking people to take care of their properties, we should be taking care of ours. And I think we do a stellar job in some areas. And then just little areas like this, I think. And it's also like I've brought up before about like biking, it's the rocks and everything else, right? So it's not just the weeds, it's the rocks and the danger from that, and when we have so much construction in the area. So I'm not sure, maybe if we could just maybe look at a municipality of a similar size and see what they do, or maybe we need another street sweeper. Like maybe it's like we have discussed that the line painting might be getting a little too much for our current capacity, and maybe we have to look at putting that out to another, like to get help with that. So maybe that's something like, is there a smaller version of a street sweeper like that can just do like little areas quickly without a big, besides the broom? Yeah.
Councilor McDougall?
Yeah, Gordon, the street sweeper just does curbs, or does it doesn't do the streets with no curbs, does it?
That's a great question. I
Well,
don't know the answer off the top of my head, but I'll
Yeah,
follow up.
I don't think it does. And the only reason it goes by my place is because the sidewalk ends on Kern and they turn, and I'm not sure if it's, I don't think they do the streets that don't have curbs. But I'm not sure why they shouldn't. What? I'm wondering that, because like I said, the only time I see them is when they come up that.
I don't think I've ever seen it go by my house.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Just a couple things, because Carrie said something that sort of made me think. Weather doesn't play a role whether or not they're street sweeping, right? If it rains, they can still street sweep, or like there's no.
It likely plays some role, but
Like they can go out when it's raining and street.
I believe so, but
Okay.
I also wouldn't be
And-
surprised if weather can play a
then
small
they-
role. It's been a dry summer though. It's not,
Right.
we haven't not been out.
And to Councillor McDougall's point, I thought the purpose was to get the stuff away from the curbs, as opposed to places where it's not curbed, the stuff goes onto the shoulder or the whatever. But I thought that was the purpose of the. Yeah, I didn't think that was the purpose.
So I wonder if we can share the schedule from, with council, and then if council can come forward with one, I guess is, first question would be, does all of council think the streets need more sweeping? And then if council does think that, then council needs to think about ways to be able to address that, to improve the sweeper availability, and whether that's running it more frequently, purchasing a second one, whatever that is. Really for you guys to decide whether or not you think that is something that is a big enough concern.
I'm gonna put this out there because it's something I've often thought we should be doing, as a municipality is I don't think we work, I don't even know how to say this. I think there's more hours in the day that things could be done, working wise, whether or not it's paving or that doesn't have to necessarily, or street painting, that doesn't have to go between 8 and 5. Other municipalities, for sure, do a lot of those jobs at other times of the day where there's not as much activity going on, so it makes painting the lines easier, it makes doing those things in theory quicker.
Especially if we're not doing it.
Whether or not we're doing it or not, I'm sure you can always find staff to wanna work whatever hours of the day. I think it's just the norm that we've got into, that we work 8 to 5, and staff probably love that aspect, and I'm just saying, it's something if we're running out of hours or if we're not getting enough stuff done in council's view, then I think we gotta start looking outside the box of how we do things.
Just on the question of whether our streets are clean enough or not, obviously it's a subjective opinion. Last week when I got the question, I did do a drive around the entire city, and the area where the street sweeper hadn't been for 2 or 3 weeks, I personally didn't see it as being overly dirty. There were certainly weeds in the curbs. Those weeds are gonna be there, I'll say, no matter what this time of year. Some property owners go out and pick the weeds out of the curbs in front of their own property. Some don't, and it's, I guess, as the CAO, I was satisfied with the level of dirt that was on the roads, but that's obviously a subjective question, right?
So can we find out, because the dirt on the road would be, the areas would be dirtier that never see a street sweeper, so what are we doing for those areas that don't have curbs and sidewalks? If in fact the street sweeper doesn't go by.
I will find that out and get back to
I
council.
mean, and I have a husband who sweeps the street in front of my house, so.
For what it's worth, and I don't know if everyone around the room here has a curb except me, but we don't have a curb, and I've never, ever even had the thought cross my mind that the streets needed to be swept. But that's just me.
I have both. I have a curb and not a curb. And on my curb street, the street sweeper comes, and then on the non-curb section, it doesn't. So maybe we can find out whether it does. The other thing to Councillor Adams' point, though, also where there is construction in particular, and maybe when we can see the schedule, we can identify or find out whether or not it gets allocated to certain areas where there is construction, because it's clear wherever there's construction debris, there's going to be more dust and dirt and accumulation for sure.
It definitely does, and we respond, like there's a regular schedule, and then the street sweeper responds to one-off events and construction events as well. Last week, there was a bunch of dirt that fell off a truck on Pope Road, and the street sweeper was sent out to clean it up, or clean up the remnants of it the next day.
And the other thing is, can we share the schedule? Can we just make it public? Can we share what the schedule is so residents even have a rough idea? And then back to my first point, I wasn't really joking when I talked about the GPS locators. Like a lot of other municipalities have put GPS locators on snow plows, on street sweepers, on everything. And that can at least, sometimes you can see that things are out and about. And I think to Councillor Snow's point too, and sometimes it's nice to know that they're out doing their thing.
It would,
People see them out and about, they're gonna get to you eventually, but it's when they don't know that the perception is like, nothing's happening.
yeah, I was just gonna say, to
We're not coming to it.
Mayor Kutcher's point, if we're using that technology, it sort of takes that call to your counselor saying where the heck's the plow at, or what's going on, right? You sort of know where it's at, and it's not a new technology by no means.
Yeah, and I have the agreement with the snow plowing agreement still sitting on my desk because I did ask that that be included as an option in that future contract, so that we can put GPS locators on if we decided. So we're going to share the schedule, we're going to consider sharing it publicly, and we're going to look at whether or not we can do some better sharing of information where they are, and then maybe we can get a better system in terms of where there are issues that arise. And then we can make sure that, and then we can discuss whether we want to get another street sweeper. And aren't we going to, I'm not going to. Sure. Yeah. Elsewhere in the world, there are alternatives, but they usually involve people sweeping the streets. But I think we have one already to volunteer. Okay, so we can come back to that with some action items. Last CAO update, crime prevention needs assessment. That was in the news this week, or last week.
I think JP's gonna handle that one.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, so we've, as is reported last week, we've commenced work on our crime prevention needs assessment with the Summerside Police Services and an external Dalhousie researcher. The initial site visit took place last week. We've finalized our project plan and deliverables over the weekend. The next number of months leading up to Christmas is going to be a fairly heavy deep dive into the data that is available to our researcher from our PRO system with Summerside Police, StatsCan, and any available resources from the RCMP. And that's just to get a really good baseline of kind of the crime that's occurring in the city from a data perspective. And then commencing in January, the research will be back for a longer stay, conducting in-person interviews with stakeholders, from representatives from the John Howard Society, operators of our men's and women's shelters, our low barrier shelter, the RCMP, Prince County Hospital staff, the staff from the mobile health unit, and others. So both the qualitative and quantitative data will kind of get assembled through the next number of months, with a draft report coming to myself in May, and with a final report and presentation coming to council in June. So that's sort of a summary of the steps being taken. The final report will be sort of a heavy, detailed document. There will be an available PowerPoint presentation that will be presented to council along with an executive summary. And it'll really help kind of guide where the gaps are from a municipal policing perspective, what's happening from an overall crime situation in our city, and then obviously some preventative measures that the consultant will recommend to staff and to council. Any questions? It's not as interesting as street sweepers, but close.
Thank you, Deputy. With that, move into item 8, our in-camera. We have 2 items on, so we'll just take a quick 5-minute recess.